supports me not only in my finances, but my entire life is something I wouldn't trade for the world. If I'm in a toxic job, I can just quit. No worrying about my child's healthcare or another mouth to feed. If I don't like where I'm living, I can just move. No worrying about my kid transferring schools or living in an area with the best school district. Daycare costs, food, diapers, clothes, 529 plan, all of that gets directed to my retirement so I can stop working earlier and have freedom and choice. The birth rate panic, it's because rich people need crops of new humans to exploit so they can keep raking in billions while people are suffering. And I'm not gonna give them that. Being child-free to me is freedom, and it's also an act of resistance. If they wanted me to have a child, they should have built a world I'd be proud to bring a child in.
There's this creator on here that made a TikTok saying about how like the childless are ungovernable. And I think the movement is called like anti-natalism, I think that's what it's called. And him talking about like how basically once you have kids, you can't take financial risks, you can't do what you want, you can't be who you want, because everything you have to like think about the kids. And it reminds me of this time when I was in my early 20s. I had a boss who once like walked in, and there was like a group of salespeople in a room. And I'll never forget the time she literally was like, yeah, I love when y'all have mortgages and I love when y'all have kids. Obviously, I didn't have either at the time. She was like, I love when y'all have mortgages and I love when y'all have kids, because that basically means you're like committed to work for me. And that never escaped my mind, where she was basically saying like her most loyal employees like have mortgages and have kids, and I don't have either. And I think that's why, I mean, I've definitely always been like anti-kids since my like teenage years. And of course, everybody's like, you're gonna change your mind, you're gonna change your mind. And I'm 32 now, and I unequivocally never, ever want kids because I love my freedom so much. But that's just a little nugget that I want to leave you with.
I'm going to drop some opinions on the whole millennials aren't having kids thing as a working class millennial. It absolutely baffles me that the government is pretending like they don't know why we're not having kids, because frankly, it is glaringly obvious. The economy is a fucking tire fire right now. The cost of groceries, the cost and availability of baby formula, the cost of diapers, the cost of childcare, the cost of giving birth in the United States averages like $14,000. I ain't got $14,000 or even really the ability to save that much money. A quick Google search told me that 73% of millennials are living paycheck to paycheck. Statistically speaking, when you're born poor in this country, you're probably going to die poor, and your kids are going to be in the same boat. Being poor fucking sucks. I don't want that for my kid. It's not that we didn't try to have better lives. A lot of us went to college, and what did that get us? A bunch of us have debt that we're never going to be able to pay off. A lot of us have degrees that are almost irrelevant because the jobs that we were told were there when we got our degree aren't really there, as it turns out. Or they are there, and the people that are in those positions can't afford to retire, so they're just going to stay where they're at. Where does that put the rest of us? Entry-level jobs. Retail, food, customer service. In the state that I live in, that averages like $11 to $15 an hour. And before y'all hit my comments saying that people making that little money shouldn't have kids, that's most of us. Maternity leave basically isn't a thing, and the jobs that offer it typically offer it unpaid for like 2 weeks, which opens up a whole slew of issues because you can't afford to take that time off, so you gotta go right the fuck back to work. Like, fuck the fact that giving birth takes a huge toll on your body. The people who have C-sections, which is a major surgery, can't afford to take the recovery time. When you've gotta go back to work in 2 weeks or immediately, then you don't get that critical bonding like period of time with your infant. If you're working all day, then you can't breastfeed your kid every couple of hours, so you have to depend on baby formula, which again is extremely expensive and potentially unavailable. That's how you end up with latchkey kids. That's how you end up with mommy and daddy issues and abandonment issues because your parents are never around. If you're at work all day and don't have a family member or somebody that doesn't have to work and can watch your kid all day for free, then you've got to pay for childcare, which is outrageous. In the state that I live in, the average cost of just daycare is $15.77 an hour. When you are making as little money as millennials are, childcare is literally inaccessible. When you can't afford to take care of your child, that's called neglect, and you can have that child taken from you and face serious legal repercussions. Even if it wasn't your fault, say baby formula wasn't available in your area, so you couldn't afford to feed your kid, so you get slapped with neglect charges. That company that couldn't provide the baby formula faces absolutely no repercussions. And then I recently just learned about how the diaper industry is like a whole thing. Most other countries have their children potty trained by 18 months old. The US doesn't even recommend starting potty training until you're 2 years old. And when you start potty training that late, it's going to take you a while to get a hang of it, which is just more money in diaper industry pockets. What I think is going on genuinely is the government is starting to sweat the fact that their working class isn't replenishing itself. When the bubonic plague hit Europe, it knocked out like 30 to 50% of the entire population, which made workers a lot scarcer. So they actually had to pay them more in order to convince them to come work for them, which we all know is the absolute last thing that any of these companies want to have to do. How many millennials do you know own their own house? Kudos to those of us that do, but the vast majority of us are renters or live with our parents or live with a pile of roommates. The cost of rent increases a lot every single year. I don't want to bring a child into a situation where I'm not sure I'm going to have somewhere to live in a year. It's not that we don't want to have kids. A lot of us do. In fact, I would love to have a kid with my wife, but I'm not going to have a kid in this country right now. I'm not. And this is entering conspiracy territory a little bit, but I think the government's interest in removing abortion rights and access in certain states is in a direct response to us not having kids. They can't force us to reproduce, but they can force us to give birth. The government views us and treats us like livestock. That's why we don't want to have kids.
These